Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share about the history, Spanish colonialism in the Philippines. The central government. The Spaniards established different institutions to administer the archipelago. This included a highly organized colonial government, composed of the central and local governments. The central government was the highest administrative authority during that period. It directed to the affairs of the entire colony from Intramuros, Manila, which was the seat of the Spanish government. Governor General. The Governor General was the highest government officials during the Spanish time. The King of Spain himself appointed the Governor General. The Governor General appointed his own civil council and assigned military governors and other officials to rule the country. His main duty was to oversee the whole colony and to see to it that the laws and orders of the Spanish king were implemented. The power of the Governor General in the country was linked to monarch. He ruled over the Royal Audiencia or High Court, the armed forces, and enjoined private privilege from commerce. The Royal Audiencia was the highest court in the Philippines during the Spanish colonial rule. It was established by King Philip II of Spain in 1583. It had the power to put at trial the high-ranking members of the colonial government, including the Governor General. The local government. These are the provincial, municipal, and barangay. The government structure. In provincial, alcaldes, mayores, and corregidores. And gobernadorcillos will rule in the municipal. And for barangay, cabeza de barangay. And then we have alcaldes, the provinces that has been fully conquered and pacified. Have the alcalde mayor or mayor to rule and implemented the laws in the provinces. Corregimientos, provinces that have not yet been pacified. And it will lead by the corregidores. The provinces were divided into towns or pueblos. The gobernadorcillo was the head of the town. This position could be occupied by former datus or cabeza de barangay. It was the highest government position that a native could occupy. The rest of the higher positions were given only to Spaniards. The main duty of the gobernadorcillo was to collect tax, especially from the ports. Each pueblo was further subdivided into small communities called barrios or barangay. Each barangay was headed by the cabeza. A former datu or a prominent native assumes this government position. The cabeza de barangay aided the gobernadorcillo in collecting taxes. The barangay up to now is still the smallest political unit in the Philippines. The union of the church and state. The Catholic religion was the state religion of the Spanish government. The state and the church worked side by side in implementing Spanish laws and policies. The state was in charge of the rules, the budget, and the appointment of people to administrative posts. The church was in charge of converting the natives, whom the Spaniards called Indios, to Christianity. The Spaniards believed that by converting the people to Christianity, it would be a lot easier to make them conform to Spanish authority. The economic life during the Spanish colonial times. Many Spaniards were more motivated by their economic interests than their desire to Christianize the natives. Their main concern was to take advantage of the riches of the land. The Spanish authorities started to impose many economic policies that were advantageous to them, but were detrimental to the Filipinos. The native were exploited and maltreated. The Encomienda System. The Encomienda System was a system established by the Spaniards to reward the conquistadores who helped in the initial stages of colonizing the archipelago. Encomenderos were mostly conquistadores who were given pieces of land to manage. The Encomienda System was first implemented in the Visayas and was abolished in 1674. The tribute. Tribute were paid either in cash, in the form of service, or through agricultural products. The Polo or forced labor, Polo servicio, or forced labor was imposed on all male natives aged 16 to 60 years old. This was mandatory for all male natives except for the gobernadorcillo and the Spanish mestizos. The men who served in the Polo were called polistas and were required to work for the government in the construction of roads, bridges, ships, and other services. They rendered service without pay for a period of 40 days in a year. Those who could not work in the Polo paid a fine called falya and were exempted from the Polo. The Galleon Trade. The Galleon Trade in Manila, also called the Manila-Acapulco Trade, began in 1565. The products from Manila were shipped first to Mexico, then they were brought to Spain. The galleons from the Manila carried Chinese products like silk, textiles, porcelain, spices, and ivory. This galleon trade benefited the Spaniards, even the friars. Early resistance against the Spanish colonization. The Battle of Mactan was the first successful native resistance against foreign invaders. Lapu-Lapu led the people of Mactan against the Spanish forces led by Magellan. And they had the battle in Mactan Beach, wherein Ferdinand Magellan were killed as well as with some of his people. Muslim resistance to Spanish rule. Muslim communities in Mindanao resisted the Spaniards and launched several attacks against Spanish settlements in the Visayas and Luzon. Tamblot revolt in Bohol from 1621 to 1622. Tamblot was a babaylan from Bohol. A babaylan is a native priest or priestess. In present historic time, the babaylan was a spiritual leader, a healer or a medium and a philosopher. When the natives converted to Christianity, many turned away from their folk religion and obeyed their parish priest. The Tamblot revolt in Bohol, 1621 and 1622. Tamblot convinced the people to return to their faith of their ancestors. The revolt began when Jesuit priests who were administered to Bohol in those times were in Cebu for at least for the St. Francis Xavier. When the news of the revolt reached Don Juan de Alcannazo, the alcalde mayor of the Cebu, he sent 50 Spanish soldiers, 100 Kapampangan soldiers, and 1,000 Shalo soldiers to the island of Bohol. The battle was fought amidst heavy rains until Tamblot and his followers were defeated. Sumuroy revolt in Samar from 1649 to 1650. Agustin Sumuroy, an expert sailor, headed the revolt in Samar that spread as far as Bicol and Mindanao. The Warais rebelled against the forcible drafting of workers from the Visayas to work in Cavite shipyards. The Dagohoy revolt in Bohol from 1744 to 1829. Francisco Dagohoy Sanrijas was a cabeza de barangay and led the famous Dagohoy Rebellion against the Spanish government from 1744 to 1829. It was the longest revolt in the Philippine history. Forced labor was one of the causes of revolt. But what triggered the decision to up the arms against the Spanish authorities in Bohol was the refusal of the Jesuit priests to give a Christian burial to Dagohoy's brother. The Silang revolt in Ilocos from 1762 to 1763. The uprising headed by Diego Silang started in the provinces of Ilocos Norte and Cagayan, where most people were against the Spaniards. Diego Silang was very intelligent and fluent in Spanish. He learned the language when he worked as a messenger for priests in Ilocos. His frequent trips to Manila opened his eyes to the abuses of the Spaniards, including the huge amount of tributes that the Spanish government was imposing on the Filipinos. The British plan to unseat the Spanish colonial empire in the Philippines did not materialize, but Diego Silang was able to rule as governor. His appointment came from the British who were in control of Manila at that time. Diego Silang was killed by his friend Miguel Vicos, who was hired by the friars to slay him. His wife Gabriela Silang took over his leadership and fought the Spaniards courageously. Hundreds of soldiers pursued her and her troops. They were driven to Abra, where they were later captured. She and her followers were executed on September 20, 1763. That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. I love you all.